All right, so we're diving into the world of Elvis Presley today. Beyond the blue suede shoes, beyond the the legendary hip swivels, this deep dive is going to be really fascinating. We're using Elvis Presley, the king who changed everything, to kind of explore the man behind the music and really try to get a sense of what made him such a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, Elvis's story, it's really interesting because it embodies a lot of the complexities of the American dream.
Right.
Born in, just a tiny two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi, and then, skyrockets to global stardom and ends up living in Graceland. It's a classic rags to riches tale. But his life, it's also filled with these, personal struggles, tragedies. It's not just a straight line to success.
Yeah, it's fascinating how his journey kind of mirrors that classic American dream narrative.
Yeah.
But the book really digs deeper and shows us the challenges, the heartbreaks, all woven into that success story. But it goes even further. It calls Elvis a revolution wrapped in rhinestones. Now, that has me intrigued. What made him so revolutionary?
I think, to really understand Elvis's impact, you have to understand the social landscape of the 1950s.
Okay.
Think about it. The post-war boom, everyone's kind of anxious about the Cold War, the civil rights movement starting to gain momentum, all these massive cultural shifts happening. And then boom, here comes Elvis, shaking things up with his music, defying the conservative norms of the time.
Yeah, and the book mentions how his performances, especially those infamous hip movements, they were considered downright scandalous back then.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to imagine now, just how shocking that was to audiences at the time.
Absolutely. He challenged the very fabric of what American society thought it was, especially when it came to ideas about race and sexuality. And then his music, it's this blend of country blues, gospel. He created this sound that was both familiar and totally groundbreaking. It wasn't just about the music itself either. His love of black music, especially blues, that played a really crucial role in bringing racial divides at a time when, segregation was still very much the norm.
The book specifically mentions Blue Moon of Kentucky right now.
Right.
Originally a bluegrass tune, which he transformed with that rockabilly beat, showing that that real blend of genres that he had going on. And then there's Hound Dog, which he adapted from Big Mama Thornton's blues version and gave it that rock and roll energy that made it a global hit. It's fascinating how he pulled from all these different musical wells and just created something entirely new.
Exactly. And that ability to fuse musical traditions, especially bringing in elements of black music into what was at the time a predominantly white musical landscape that was truly revolutionary for its time. He introduced white audiences to sounds they'd literally never heard before.
Wow.
And that contributed to this cultural exchange that really had a profound impact on how music evolved and how social attitudes started to shift.
So we're seeing Elvis as more than just a performer. Right. He's like a cultural force, challenging norms, pushing boundaries. But what about the man behind the persona? What was Elvis like when the stage lights went down?
Well, the book tries to peel back those layers of fame and reveal the complex, often contradictory individual underneath. It talks about his close relationship with his mother, Gladys, which really shaped him, and his romance with Priscilla, which was, this whirlwind kind of thing. You see the complexities and the pressures of their relationship, especially given their age difference.
Yeah, and the age difference between them, as the book points out, definitely raised some eyebrows back then. It does seem like fame took its toll on him personally.
It's the double-edged sword of fame, isn't it?
Yeah.
The book portrays Elvis as kind of struggling with loneliness, seeking solace in spirituality, and ultimately he's just battling the weight of his own legend. I mean, he's grappling with, these huge existential questions, just like anyone else, despite having this dazzling facade.
It's that reminder that behind the iconic image, the hit records, the adoring fans, there's a human being, navigating their own complexities and challenges. We see those vulnerabilities beneath the king persona.
Yeah, it's really incredible how the book shows all that, the pressures and the complexities Elvis faced, even though he was so successful. It really makes you think about the price of fame, how it can impact even those who seem to have it all, But before we go too far down that road, I'm curious about how Elvis fit into the broader picture of what was happening in America at the time. The book keeps saying he wasn't just reflecting those changes, but he was actually shaping them.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. Elvis, he comes along right when the kind of strict conservatism of the 1950s is starting to crack a little. And he becomes a symbol of, youthful rebellion, challenging not just the musical boundaries, but those societal norms as well. Right. And it wasn't just the music, it was how he performed it, right?
Yeah.
Those hip movements, his style, that whole rebellious energy, it was all a direct challenge to the status quo. It's amazing how those things could be seen as so provocative back then.
Well, you got to remember, back then, conformity, that was the big thing. You know, any little deviation from the norm, that was met with resistance. And Elvis's music, his style, it was seen as a threat to those traditional values, at least by some people. And that, of course, only made him more appealing to, like, the younger generation that was hungry for something new, something exciting.
It's like he was giving a voice to that yearning for change, that desire to break free from the past, you know? But it wasn't just about rebellion, though, was it? Yeah. The book also talks about Elvis and his impact on race relations, which was a pretty controversial topic back then.
Oh, absolutely. You know, his love for Black music, his willingness to, blend genres, and his performances that often attracted mixed audiences, all of that challenged the kind of prevailing racial segregation of the era. It's not like he was, explicitly a civil rights activist or anything, but his actions really spoke volumes.
Right. So his music became this unexpected bridge between Black and white cultures, a space where those boundaries could be like blurred, even if just for a little while.
Exactly. And while it's, important to acknowledge the kind of complexities of Elvis's relationship with Black music and culture, there's no denying the impact he had in introducing white audiences to the richness and depth of those musical traditions. It really did spark a cultural exchange that had a lasting effect on how American music and society evolved.
And the book even mentions how, like, some critics back then actually accused him of, stealing Black music, which, looking back, really highlights those deeply ingrained racial tensions of the time.
Yeah, it was a complicated issue. And those accusations really reflected how uncomfortable some people felt with a white artist achieving, mainstream success with a musical style so rooted in Black culture.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, Elvis always acknowledged his influences.
Right.
And he expressed deep respect for the artists who inspired him.
Right. It's a reminder of how music can be this powerful force for change, but also a reflection of, the social and cultural dynamics of its time. And Elvis, whether he meant to or not, was right at the center of all that. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about, like, his musical range. It always blows me away how he wasn't just stuck in one genre. Mm-hmm. He could do country, blues, gospel, even pop, and blend it all into his own unique sound.
Yeah, and that speaks to his talent, you know?
Yeah.
And his willingness to experiment. He didn't let genre boundaries limit his creativity. Like, you can hear those gospel influences in songs like Peace in the Valley.
Yeah.
His country roots are obvious in Blue Moon of Kentucky, and that raw energy of blues just comes alive in Hound Dog. He took all those elements and, crafted something totally new.
And those gospel recordings, wow, you can really feel the depth of emotion and spirituality in his voice when he sings those songs. It's like, you're hearing his soul laid bare.
Yeah, and gospel music was a big part of his upbringing, and it stayed with him throughout his whole career. Those songs, they provided an outlet for, like, his spiritual yearnings and, showcased a different side of his vocal abilities.
Right, and then you have that whole Las Vegas era where he really embraced that kind of flamboyant stage persona, those iconic sequined jumpsuits.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole different Elvis, but still undeniably him.
Yeah, and that period often gets kind of overshadowed by his earlier rock and roll years, but it's such a fascinating part of his evolution as an artist. Like, he embraced the whole spectacle, the showmanship, and he continued to push those boundaries musically and stylistically.
Yeah, it's like he was constantly reinventing himself while staying true to, like, his core musical essence.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to experiment, evolve, challenge what people expected Elvis Presley to be.
Right. So we've talked about his cultural impact, his incredible musical range, how he was constantly evolving as an artist. But, what about the man behind the music? Who was Elvis beyond the stage persona? The book really hints at a lot of kind of complexities, even contradictions.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradox. You have this global icon, the king of rock and roll, adored by millions, yet, the book reveals a man who's struggling with the immense pressure of that fame.
Right.
Grappling with loneliness and self-doubt and seeking solace in, spirituality and those close relationships he had.
It makes you wonder if he was ever able to, like, reconcile that public image with the private man. Did he ever truly feel comfortable in his own skin? Or was he constantly battling that internal conflict?
That's a question that, continues to intrigue biographers and fans. even today. The book doesn't really give us any definitive answers, but it does paint this portrait of a man who, despite his extraordinary success, remained very human, wrestling with the same vulnerabilities and anxieties that we all face.
Right. It really does humanize him in a way that makes his story all the more compelling. It's not just a tale of fame and fortune, but this journey of, self-discovery, struggle, and ultimately that search for meaning and connection in a world that often felt probably pretty overwhelming for him.
Yeah, it's really amazing how this book, reveals that human side of Elvis, the struggles, the complexities behind all that, dazzling persona. But amidst all that, it's his music that keeps, resonating across the generations. What is it about his music, you think, that makes it so timeless? Well, it's a lot of things, I mean, his talent, obviously, his charisma, that undeniable connection he had with the spirit of the times, and that unique ability to blend all those genres, that created a sound that, broke down barriers and continues to captivate people.
And the book really gets into those specific influences, like how he took songs from, country, gospel, blues, and infused them with his own style, his own energy.
Yeah, you can hear that in so many of his hits. Like Blue Moon of Kentucky, for instance, was originally a bluegrass tune, and he transformed it with that rockabilly beat. And then Hound Dog, he took Big Mama Thornton's blues version, and gave that electrifying rock and roll hedge that made it an anthem for a whole generation.
Right. It wasn't just about covering those songs. It was about reimagining them, breathing new life into them, and creating something totally unique in the process. It's like he was this musical alchemist, blending all these different elements to forge something new.
Yeah, that ability to fuse those musical traditions, especially, incorporating elements of Black music into what was, at the time, a pretty white musical landscape, that was groundbreaking. He introduced white audiences to sounds and rhythms they'd never heard before. It wasn't without its controversy, though, right?
Right. The book mentions how some people accused him of, appropriating Black music, which again just highlights those racial tensions of the time.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure. While Elvis never claimed to be the, originator of those musical styles, he did always acknowledge his influences and express a lot of respect for those Black artists who inspired him. And his love for gospel music, which is, so deeply rooted in the Black church tradition, is evident in songs like Peace in the Valley. You can really feel the raw emotion, the spiritual yearning in his voice when he sings those songs.
Oh, absolutely. Those gospel recordings are so powerful. But then you have the Las Vegas era, right?
Yeah.
With the elaborate stage shows, the sequin jumpsuits. It's a whole different side of Elvis.
Yeah, that era often gets kind of overlooked, but it's a really fascinating chapter in his musical evolution. He embraced a more theatrical approach, incorporated elements of showmanship, spectacle, but always stayed true to that, musical core.
It's like he was constantly pushing boundaries, evolving as an artist, but always maintaining that essential Elvis essence, right? The thing that really resonated with his fans.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to experiment, to evolve, to challenge people's expectations of who Elvis Presley was supposed to be.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, what stands out to you as the biggest takeaway from all this? What makes Elvis such an enduring figure, even, decades after his death?
For me, it's the combination of raw talent, that rebellious spirit that challenged norms, and that really unique ability he had to connect with audiences on such a visceral level. He didn't just reflect his time, he helped shape it, leaving a lasting mark on, music, culture, even social attitudes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. This deep dive has really gone beyond, just the blue suede shoes and the hip swivels. We've seen the complexities of the man, his music, his impact. He was so much more than just the king. He was a revolutionary, a cultural force, a timeless artist whose music continues to resonate with people.
And if this, exploration has sparked your interest, I really encourage you to delve deeper into his music, explore the different genres he embraced, and, discover the stories behind those iconic songs.
There's a whole world of Elvis to discover out there. And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to try a little karaoke, right?
Yeah.
Just remember, it's all about the passion, the energy, letting that Elvis spirit move you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep the music playing.